Good afternoon. I'm Edith Matlock, Director of the Carmelite Institute of North America, and welcome to our ongoing live streaming webinar series. Before we begin today, I would just like to make a few announcements, some housekeeping things. First, as Father is speaking today, you will have the ability to ask questions. If you scroll down below your video screen and you have a Facebook account, you will see that there's a place there for you to type in questions. And I will be looking at that periodically as Father is speaking. So at the end of his talk, we will be asking Father questions that you have written there. If you don't have a Facebook account, please email me your questions to director@carmelstream.org. director@carmelstream.org. And I will again be monitoring any questions that come in during Father's talk. Also, I'm not going to really talk about the Carmelite Institute of North America now. At the end of the webinar, a few minutes afterwards, Steve, our tech guy, will send you a link on a short 3-minute video which explains the Carmelite Institute and the work that we do here in North America. But I just want to give you some few updates about what's happening at the Institute just quickly. First, if you check out our website, we've added the history of the Carmelite order. Parts 1 and 2 are now there. And for part 2, that's from St. Teresa of Avila to present time, we have put up a downloadable study guidebook. It tells what each session is about. It has some nice discussion questions and additional readings and research that you may want to continue to do on your own. And we've also added articles written by fellow Carmelites, not just from here in North America, but from Europe and Australia. You might want to take a look at some of these articles on Carmelite themes. These are all written by Carmelites, and they're all on Carmelite themes. I think you might enjoy reading some of them. So now let's get to the webinar. Today, I'm pleased to announce we have Father Eduardo Augusto Scarel, who is an advisor to Pope Francis, and he did advise the Pope as Pope Francis wrote his Earth Care encyclical Laudato Si in 2015. Father Eduardo's insights integrate spirituality with his academic research and activism on international climate panels. Father Eduardo's talk is designed to inspire a wide audience, academics, students, and all persons interested in how faith and science issues of climate change and other areas intersect. Father Eduardo has been chair professor and researcher at the School of Astronomy and Geophysics, State University of La Plata, since 2014. He is developing research at the School of Physics, Salamanca State University, Spain, where he was transferred to join the formation team at the International Study House of the Carmelite Order. That is their international formation house. And now, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Father Eduardo Scarel.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Sister Edith, for this kind introduction. I'm happy to be here with you to share with you this presentation, this webinar entitled Spirituality of Integral Ecology, the Healing Pathway for Humans with Nature and God. Give me just a couple of seconds to load my presentation, my PowerPoint. Okay. Let's start. Thanks to Pope Francis, we have in the Church an increasing and sensitive consciousness in face of the phenomenon of environmental degradation as part of our mission in justice, peace, and integrity of creation.
Sorry, Father, we're not seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay, let's start again. Go back to the uh,
You'll want to minimize the Google Hangout
yeah.
after you hit start screen sharing.
Okay.
Now you
Can
can,
you see it?
okay, great. Yep, now you can just
Great.
maximize the PowerPoint and we're good. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. So let's start again from the beginning. Thanks to Pope Francis, we have in the Church an increasing and sensitive conscience in the face of the phenomenon of environmental degradation as part of our mission in justice, peace, and integrity of creation. A conscience that could have been impossible to imagine, or it has been at least suspicious to realize 2 decades ago. The work of justice and peace can no longer be devoted only to the promotion and fight for fair human rights to territory, food, fresh water, health, work, and education, or to the defense of minority and fight against human trafficking and migrants and refugees, as examples of many other problems still affecting hundreds of million people with undesired high occurrence in the world. Gradually, justice and peace opened up to integrity of creation as a new horizon, as never done before, to take care of creation, to integrate the created things as an inherent part of the human life's dignity for all human beings. We have learned that to take care of nature as the only space that receives human life and the atmosphere as the blanket that warms it is so important for evangelization as the care for every singular human life from the early stages of life until death. Having, for, having this for granted, Pope Francis decided to write a marvelous encyclical totally devoted to the care for creation, Laudato Si. In his writing, with a reference to the saint from Assisi, he invites women and men everywhere to look at the earth not only as a home, but as our sister and mother earth, establishing a kind of family intimacy with nature, something not seen before with such mystical nuances. He thinks of the earth as having a certain subjectivity, given that she, nature earth, is in crisis and has a voice that cries out on account of the damage done by human beings. It is clear that this metaphor finds support in the Bible. That is why the Pope reminds us that the land that is oppressed by human beings groans and suffers the pains of delivery. The Bible offers support to our origins. We too are earth, Francis reminds us. This metaphorical language, coming from the mystics and from the Bible, allows Francis to talk about Catholic thought in harmony with environmental sciences and ecology. From here on, the encyclical will be an appeal for an environmental enlightenment and an understanding of the problems of the environment based on the sciences. Francis, from the beginning, rejects the biblical language of dominion, domination, and in its place offers a metaphorical understanding using the concept of integral ecology that demands new categories that go beyond the language of mathematics or of biology and connect us to the essence of what is human. I believe that with these words, Francis is opening the door to the language of the spirit, to the spirituality of integral ecology. In other words, integral ecology is a way of living in a kingdom vein. The word spirituality can express various concepts. It is a very plastic word. Among its meanings, I opt for that for which spirituality is understood as that way and beliefs that guide the fundamental options and decisions of life, a new way that gives rise to an alternative lifestyles for which less is more, as Pope Francis says, distinct from the dominant culture of consumerism and waste. In turn, The word ecology or ecology in Greek can be understood as the deep understanding or knowledge of the right relationships present in the environment and life enclosed by it, which allows a balanced and healthy deployment of the potentialities of life in that geography. The link between ecology and spirituality requires recognizing that the ultimate goal of Christian spirituality and human in general is to achieve harmony, balance, peace with all creation, with yourself and with God. We Carmelites call this horizon contemplation. As a Carmelite, I learned that contemplation is not a static dynamism, but the inner human space where spirituality expands upon creation. Know that the whole reality, the spiritual and the physical, can be regarded through the Trinitarian dynamism, the divine power, the humanness, and the other created things, both visible and invisible, in mutual interpenetration, being the divine power, the Spirit of God, developing and sustaining source of reality. The contemplation of such reality is a call to discover or be aware of the empowering love of God within the humanness, concretized in every human being and the created things. And such a process requires a deep human transformation through prayer, community, and service that are the paths to contemplation. Recall that ecology is the human activity that is concerned with a comprehensive understanding of nature, that is to say, the created things and humanness, in order to regulate the inner relationships among them within the earth, our common home. The comprehensive management means to consider the often forgotten divine dimension as well. As Pope Francis says, everything is interconnected, and this invites us to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity. Thus, the expression ecological crisis or environmental crisis means that the knowledge and comprehensive management of such relationships are at risk. Probably the crisis has arisen due to the implicit silence of the divine dimension of reality that is present in the way we have been behaving in our societies in last decades. The roots of the current ecological crisis appear to be linked to the way that human relationships are developed towards the divine and nature. If so, contemplation can be regarded as the essential manner to recover the divine dimension of reality. Hence, prayer, community, and service may approach each other to mend nature. That is the link between spirituality and ecology within the concept of integral ecology. Having said that, integral ecology thus connects human beings with their environment as part of an overall process of evolution and with the creator. The latter threefold connection between God, humanness, and nature is smoothly addressed in number 83 of the encyclical. Pope Francis says, "The ultimate destiny of the universe is the fullness of God, which has already been attained by the risen Christ, the measure of the maturity of all things." Here we can add yet another argument for rejecting every tyrannical and irresponsible domination of human beings over other creatures. The ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us towards a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illumines all things. Human beings endowed with intelligence and love and drawn by the fullness of Christ are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator. This text, in the context of the encyclic of the Ecclesial Magisterium, concerning the relation between nature and human beings is revolutionary. It is in line with the evolutionary approach of the natural science that we find already in Paul VI and with the language of the Spirit. In a certain sense, it gives new value to creatures who tend towards God, with and through the whole of humanity. Nature is not there just to be at the service of human beings for them to use and abuse in whatever way they like, but rather the human person has the responsibility to take care of nature and orient humanity itself in the direction of the transcendent. Here we may be talking about the spirituality of the cosmos. From the encyclical, from the start of the encyclical, integral ecology is a new paradigm of human relationship with nature and with God. As a paradigm of relationships, integral ecology can be simply assumed as a spirituality. Francis pushes us into a new understanding of human relationship with nature. He wants us to pass from an image of the human being as a sovereign ruler over the rest of creation to another paradigm of a universal intimate family. Earth is my mother and my sister, in solidarity with the weak and the marginalized people and living beings in danger of extinction. Understanding the spirituality of integral ecology, or in other words, the link between ecology and spirituality, requires, first of all, to consider contemplation as a spiritual path that is intimately related to the process of consolidation of the human being's self-conscience, integrating both the dark and luminous sides of personality within an endless journey towards the maturity of human affectivity, intellect, and sexuality. These three factors of human life can be considered as parts of the human desire dynamism. Such integration needs and is performed by an ethical and existential proposal. For Carmelites, for instance, that ethical and existential proposal is living a life in allegiance to Jesus Christ and all its consequences contained in our rule of life, certainly. Thus, it turns to be a spiritual itinerary towards growth in humanness. God has created us for this, for an ongoing growth in humanness while keeping harmonic relationships with all the created things and God, according to the Trinitarian dynamism mentioned above. Secondly, we need to understand that the roots of the current ecological crisis are human and not merely technical or scientific ones, as if ecological problems were only a matter of deep changes in technology according to each environmental issue. That is to say, it is not just to change towards new clean energies or efficient technologies or renewables. If it were so, we would not be speaking about crisis. The current ecological crisis, evidenced mainly by climate change, energy depletion, increasing breach between the richest and the poorest people in our nations, and the loss of that biodiversity, among others, seem to have started with human being crisis. During the last century, very deep social changes have been consolidated, especially our consumption of human beings has changed noticeably. We pass from thinking of ourselves as human beings equipped with reason, self-sufficiency, and freedom from which we could make options towards what we consider the best and proper for each of us, towards a consumption of human beings eternally unsatisfied, prior to which the technology, as a caring nanny, comes to meet every need and desire. Since ever the mankind has undergone dissatisfaction which emerges as an endogenous violence in the social level or as an inner violence of rivalry and fight for surviving. Likewise, oftentimes society have to take care of such violence through diverse mechanisms that could channel the polarized power able to be self-destructive. For instance, the traditions and religions, with their rites and customs, would work to contain or limit the expansion of such violent forces born within due to the frustration of human desire in sexual, affective, and intellectual dimensions. When I say that technology appears like a consenting mother who grants us everything we want, we wish without postponing it, I also mean that thanks to technology, several human achievements have been reached, allowing us to make an extraordinary steps towards new human capabilities to transform our nature and to enhance and embellish the quality of life. And this is good. We now can enjoy a vast technological development which makes our lives more comfortable and healthier thanks to the growing scientific knowledge. That is the luminous side of this process. However, the technological development has been appropriated by economic and cultural models to consolidate a social and pragmatic program of living, which can be named a technocracy or technocratic paradigm. Pope Francis, for Pope Francis, it is the way that humanity has taken up technology and its development according to an undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm. The laws or mottos that rule out our societies under technocracy are well known by everyone. For instance, grow or die, otherwise you will be out of the system. Go out and buy to fight unemployment. Unemployment is now the new taboo word among our societies. Quantity and acceleration. Everything must be done at the speed of computers and scales of machines, and so on. The traditional human rhythms and cycles of nature are estimated as illegal within the new codes. Apparently, we are unaware that technocracy model of human development is a human construction. It is indispensable to understand that it is not an uncontrolled natural force to which we must subject, as we often tend to believe even within our communities of faith. Furthermore, the conventional economy belongs to the model of technocratic human development. It lies on the logic of dissatisfaction of desire, or in other words, the logic of inner violence. The conventional economy empowers the rivalry between human desire and greed by producing abundance of goods to temporarily alleviate the tension of desire. In addition, globalized societies guided by the technocracy laws have created their own myths, such as the evil is unreal. The unreality of evil is understood as the absence of material goods, which is improper to be acquainted with all the pain and anxiety observed in real life, such as illness, death, social injustice, etc. This myth implies, from the technocratic framework, that the human desire and the greed are inoffensive because they emulate the relationship between the producer and consumer. Other beliefs configuring a materialistic world of our globalized societies are: full is better than empty, much is better than little, big is better than small. Therefore, we must feel everything, to have everything, to know everything. They are translated into programmatic behaviors such as the social premise that everyone must succeed professionally, a synonym of accomplishment. In our culture, there are no more places for experiences of gratuity as the one we can experience during the nude attitude of just simply to look around without expecting more than to look around, since contemplation is an odd word. So far, we have seen that we have a social development model that is based on the dissatisfied desire economy. At this point, the first ecological dilemma appears. Human desire is a psycho-spiritual dynamism that can be easily manipulated by external factors to the freedom and decision-making of every individual. This fact is observed within the phenomenon of globalization, where the changes in legacy towards social fragmentation and the fashion of goods and services for consumption induced by advertising all become external forces that irresistibly control us from within. We no longer consume those things we need, but everything we are offered without distinction. For instance, how many cell phones have you changed or been forced to change in the last 3 years? We have nowadays needs that did not exist before. The technological novelties appear to be little paradises of illusion that are updated every day and suited to our increasing fragmented world. Hence, consumerism has been imposed as the only way for the development of Western life. It has been imposed by the strong interest in the local economy of global enterprises. We are taught that the unique human goal in life is profit, and every human action tends to maximize it. The maximization of profit is at the expense of whatever, that is to say, against many people's lives and the environment. The true cost of entropy, that regards the resilience or the capacity for self-recovery of every ecosystem, including that of the humans, is the existential mortgage of future generations. In the future, they will not have sufficient energy sources for living, as we now are consuming most of goods at the lowest cost and maximum gain. Another second human dilemma, anchored to the nucleus of human beings, is as follows. The human desire is unlimited. According to St. John of the Cross, the heart of human being is not satisfied with less than the infinite. The infinite he refers to is clearly God himself. For this reason, when the desire is released at global scales, natural goods are insufficient to satisfy it. The Earth implodes. The physical limits of the planet, which result to be too small in comparison, are evidently the natural limits to the dissatisfied desire economy. There exists another human limitation between the unlimited human desire and the economy based on it, influencing negatively on the Earth's health. Our daily concrete acts are performed locally, but their effects are global, and we are not aware of this fact. Moreover, as a consequence of current global patterns of development and consumption, the social injustice is a common field in many parts of the world. Our throwaway logic and consumerism is a luxurious lifestyle if compared with the lifestyles associated to a half of global population. That is to say, only few technologically developed societies enjoy standard well-being by depleting global goods. According to FAO, a quarter of the global population irreversibly consumes 80% of the Earth's goods in order to sustain their high standard lifestyles. That is why I consider that the spirituality may be both an ecological proposal and a personal itinerary towards a healing transformation. The teaching of our masters, such as John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, John of St. Sanson, among others, is mainly based on the traditional and Carmelite vacare deo spiritual dynamism. According to this contemplative tradition, the spiritual journey makes human desire mature. In order to make this human desire mature, we need to channel our inner strengths towards healthy goals, both individually and socially, with clear healing effects on the creation. In other words, for the Carmelite, Contemplation is a path that leads you to move from a personal, multiple, full, and fragmented world of passions, desires, goods, and people, goals, and projects, to a simpler, more empty, and more unified one whose founding center is the experience of God, of the love of God, which gives fullness affectively, although not physically, since we will always need people and goods. We are not angels, would like to say Teresa. We are creatures of desire, and passions effectively mobilize us to love and work to care for others and transform our environment into a more beautiful and better place. In this healthy context, the experience of God in your heart will make you realize that only He is enough in most of the times. The vacare deo dynamism, literally self-emptying for God, or living in God's presence dynamism, implies to recognize the relevant priority of God in our lives. Such an inner emptying as a process of or affective dynamism traces a spiritual itinerary so that God may simultaneously occupy His place in your life. I stress here that it's not about God being the object of our desire, but that God can be that experience of a greater and better love that inflames the heart, in words of St. John of the Cross, to the extent of polarizing the forces of your desire and establish a salvific order of priorities in life. Note that human desire seems to have such odd characteristics that astonish psychologists of all times. Human desire is such a of infinitude of everything and nothing at the same time, being thus ambiguous. It means that we want everything right now and from everywhere, but we do not know exactly what it is. The desire is that of the impossible. Therefore, the existential and the spiritual path for human beings throughout their lives is to pay attention and give efforts to what really matters, as Mary did according to Jesus' counsel in the Gospel Luke 2:19. Only when a person is centered, that is to say, when all the strengths of his/her desire are channeled in and towards God, then it is possible to achieve equilibrium and peace. John of the Cross teaching is very clear in this context. The discreet reader has ever need to bear in mind the intent and end which I have in this book, which is the direction of the soul through all its apprehensions, natural and supernatural, without deception or hindrance, in purity of faith, to divine union with God. Thus, the Carmelite saints' main objective is to help people find their direction to God by going within themselves, because the center of the soul is God. I find his poem Spiritual Canticle very inspiring. Exquisitely defines the spiritual and the existential itinerary of human beings as we've been explaining before. The first two stanzas, for instance, are illuminated. Where have you hidden, beloved, and left me moaning? You fled like the stag after wounding me. I went out calling you, but you were gone. Shepherds, you who go up through the sheepfolds to the hill, if by chance you see him I love most, tell him I'm sick, I suffer, and I die. John of the Cross Canticle describes metaphorically, as a poem can be, the origin of the unlimited human desire, the wound caused by God, leaving the soul as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Psalm 63. The beloved's wound allows human beings to go out of themselves, developing their potentials to face reality. Psychologists argue that one of the functions of the desire dissatisfaction dynamism is the progressive development of human psyche, the personality, in interaction with the exterior. In the spiritual registry, we go out seeking heal the wound, touring the overall creation and asking to every creature, persons and things, has he, God, passed by you? Stanza 4. The major drama will be to be too demanding to creatures, asking them to occupy the place of God because we get confused by their beauty. That is always the temptation, to make the created things either material or spiritual goods, such as success, pleasure, happiness, sex, power, science, technology, technological novelties, etc., as well as people, our idols or gods adequate to our desires. However, there is nothing nor nobody on the earth that can overcome God's dwell in our hearts, the empty space reserved for Him. The divine wound is not characterized by the Spirit, is only characterized, by the Spirit of God. John of the Cross doctrine explains that human desire always runs the risk of fragmentation into multiple desires attached immoderately to things and people. The Carmelite fire warns us about disaffection through the purification of desire, which consists in orienting their inner strengths of desire toward Him who really can help enjoy human life with harmony and plenty peace. The dark night of soul has to do with this process. During the night, the addictions and unconscious desires are not obstacles to eliminate or to make disappear, but to face or overcome throughout the emptying process of the night. The spiritual emptying does not mean to the lack of things or material and spiritual goods. We need them because, again, we are not angels, but it is about to contain the appetite for or the exaggerated interest of them. And we read, for that reason we call this detachment nigh to the soul, for we are not treating here of the lack of things, since this implies no detachment on the part of the soul if it has a desire for them, but we are treating of the detachment from them of its taste and desire, for it is this that leaves the soul free and void of them, although it may have them. For it is not the things of this world that either occupy the soul or cause it a harm, since they enter it not, but rather the will and desire for them, for it is these that dwell within it. Hence, the Carmelite spiritual itinerary of the soul regards the human being interior as a recipient that must be emptied of things, that is to say, to be liberated from heavy loads so as to be filled by and with God throughout the human life journey. The pass through the nights will be the process of emptying or detachment of goods and lots, making the person mature his her desire. As long as the person goes forward in the journey of maturing desires and approaching to the union with God, a new process of refilling with the hidden divine reality will be activated. The soul's union with God is, according to John of the Cross, the plenitude and show. Only when we empty ourselves from human securities, to know, to possess, to be powerful, etc., we can discover our true value. It is not in knowledge, possessions, or power, but in God Himself who fills the human life. But this is important. Our unsacred societies have no other ways to treat the unlimited human desire rather than with the stimulation towards consumerism. Nowadays, we are clearly facing the consequences of a humanity with no God. The natural disasters, climate change, air and water pollution, social injustice, impoverishment of our peoples, among other environmental and social issues, all of them respond to unsustainable development patterns of production and consumption that are supported by the economy based on the eternally dissatisfied human desire that has no God in the horizon. The spiritual call to contemplation, as given by John of the Cross itinerary of maturing human desire, is a proposal for healing both the persons and the planet. This connection at first sight does not look like a very simple undertaking. It demands, first of all, confidence in the future and in the human person. In other words, faith in the resurrection. Pope Francis says, while this encyclical opens up a dialogue with all to seek paths of liberation together, I want to show from the beginning how the convictions of faith of Christians and impart also to other believers great motivations for the care of the nature and of the most fragile brothers and sisters. The convictions of faith are essential motivations for the care of creation. The convictions of faith that Francisco develops in Numbers 84 and 85 help us be aware of the sacredness of creation. Pope Francis says, the entire material universe is a language of God's love, of his excessive affection towards us. The soil, the water, the mountains, everything is the caress of God. Francis is convinced that to perceive each creature singing the hymn of his existence is to live joyfully in the love of God and in hope. From this core of convictions, the Pope assumes the call to peace, to justice, and to the preservation of the created. The central message of Pope is, consequently, his profound experience of love for God through each creature and the poor. This experience of the tenderness love of God through creation can be achieved through a mystical stance and will make us change our distorted perception of reality. That is why Pope Francis says in Laudato Si 25, when someone does not learn to stop to perceive and value the beautiful, it is not strange that everything becomes for him an object of unscrupulous use and abuse. We can apply the call to contemplation taught by John of the Cross and any other teaching from most of our mystical saints to Pope Francis' proposal of integral ecology. Contemplation, thus, is a path to freedom. The essence of the life of the believer is this act of living in the profound, lovely warning of God as one who opens his eyes. It is a falling into awareness that He, God, inhabits everything and is in everything. As long as human beings abandon their beliefs that their plenitude is found in materially filling everything up, they will be able to liberate the earth with the obligation to satisfy them infinitely as their released desire is. Such a proposal is certainly not easy because it requires, as first step, faith in God, a sense of life's transcendence, an acceptance of human values of gratitude and gift beyond the logic of immediate satisfaction and consumption. However, people's will would need to experience another and a greater encountering by another and a better love, which is that of God Himself, to the end that having its pleasures set upon him and deriving from him its strength. It should have courage and constancy to deny itself all other things with these. John of the Cross. Hence, the experience of the empowering love of God can help to reorient the inner forces of desire towards a more austere and simpler lifestyle, so as to deny or put off the immediate needs of pleasure and satisfaction. Definitely, it requires sacrifice in its most positive way, as a hope that is patient and a happy and complacent disclaimer for something greater and better that is coming to our lives. Contemplation, as a way of freedom, supposes the experience of the traveler who has a goal to seek God through creatures, but without dwelling on them. He achieves it successfully as he enters into a discovery of his true self, of his deepest motivations, of his desires and frustrations, talents and weaknesses. Finally, to learn to be in relationship with the others, that is, people, the creation, and God Himself, from His personal truth. Clearly, there will be new relationships of justice, peace, and integration with all creations and with God Himself, source and end of the created. Contemplation is learned by doing. It means we have to do experience the path of seeking God, of self-knowledge, and of being in contact with others, especially the poorest and most disadvantaged, and with creation. In that intimate contact, where action and reaction come into play, we can discover our own smallness and vulnerability, the mad we are made of, and how needed we are of God, others, and creation. At the same time, the urgency for care, the preservation of the creatures, of the poor, of oneself, and of God's place in the world will be activated in us, without which every horizon of work and struggle for justice and peace loses its horizon of deeper meaning. In conclusion, the spiritual contemplative path of transformation through prayer, community, and service would accomplish a personal, communitarian, and planetary healing as long as these spirituality elements can help us be aware of the following. First stage, self-knowledge or self-awareness. Our first touch is with us. We must name what we feel and develop the capacity to channelize our impulses and passions on the selected path of healing us and the creation. Second, ability to make silence. This is the prerequisite for growing and personal maturing. Friend and peaceful environment as the quiet calm described by John of the Cross. Silence for best listening to the voice of the victims, the poor, the nature. Silence fosters just, says our rule. Appraising everyday life. Life makes us mature. Little gestures can make a great difference in quality of life. Capacity to enjoy with little. Return to simplicity. Few things are really important in our lives. Little is often much and sufficient. Santa Teresa of Avila would say, God is enough. Dissatisfaction as part of our life journey. Quiet acceptance of this fact. Human aspirations and desires are infinite because they are made for God. Recover a certain sacredness of nature. To become aware of interdependence. To learn to appreciate dimensions of happiness that are not related to the fact of having and possessing. Contact with reality. What are the big deals out there? Contact with the poor, with the least favored by society, with the hopeless ones and goners of society. And finally, as Pope Francis likes, hope and optimism. Be faithful to the history and look into the future with hope. God passes by. It is a dive into the unexpected, really. But Pope Francis says, let us sing as we go. May our struggles and our concern for this planet never take away the joy of our hope. So finally, there is no doubt that humanity faces its self-destructive capacity that was limited by the sacred in the past but now appears to be unlimited. Without a growth in awareness of the divine dimension of reality, the ecological catastrophe seems to be inevitably. Bear in mind this. The contemplative dynamism is going from a multiple and full universe to one of simplicity and emptiness. Our mystics call such a purification process emptying, nudity, or loneliness of the soul. As the soul is emptied of all things, God, who is pure simplicity, might fill the soul. To make this way forward, it is only possible from the intimate call of love that surpasses all other claims that the multiplicity of the world offers and which only a genuine experience of God can give. I believe that it is only at that moment that we can honestly start talking about justice and equity in our societies. John of the Cross again enlightens us the way ahead. Travelers cannot reach new territories if they do not take new and unknown roads and abandon their familiar ones. Thank you all.
Thank you, Father Eduardo. There haven't been any questions that came in, but I wanted to thank you for, particularly in this day where everything gets politicized, thank you for reminding us again that convictions of faith help to heal us and our ecology. And also getting back to contemplation, which is the path to freedom. Thank you so much for this very necessary and uplifting talk. You certainly have brought us back to our Carmelite way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Edith. Thank you, everybody who has been attentive to this presentation. And whenever you want to be in touch with me, just send emails. Thank you.